With the end of season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen, we got introduced to many new characters that we haven't seen before, and many returning characters that all battle it out in what is known as the Shibuya Incident. But with all of these different characters that we see, the question that I would like to bring up is how strong are they really? And if a list had to be made with how they would rank from weakest to strongest, where would they rank? Well, that's what today's video is all about. But before the video starts, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and comment to help out both me and the channel. And I know y'all be vibing with my content, but we gotta get these numbers closer together. So if you're new here and would like to subscribe, then please do so. It's free and you'll always have new content from me anytime that I upload. And just to quickly clarify, I will not be using feats or statements that happen after this arc. So there will be no manga spoilers beyond season 2. And anything that happens before and up to the end of the arc, I'll be discussing. I'll also not be including Yuki as we don't actually see her fight at all, and talking about her would dive into manga spoilers. And with all of that being said, let's get into the rankings and start with the weakest characters at F tier. So for this tier, the characters that I have here are the Grasshopper Curse, or Kogai, whichever you want to call them, Haruta, Miwa, Momo, Mai, the Grandson, and Ogami, with the Grasshopper Curse being the strongest of this tier and Ogami being the weakest. I'll start with Ogami and work my way up. So the reason I have the Granny here at the bottom of this tier is simply because she has no feats at all. We only see her during the fight between Ino and the Grandson, and all she does is summon Toji and then gets one shot by him, and that's literally all that we see of her. Next is the Grandson, and while he does show feats, they aren't really good ones, and he does get beat up by Ino. Something that's important to note though is while Ino was for the most part having the upper hand against the Grandson, he was still able to keep up with and stall Ino long enough to ingest Toji's capsule, and we all know what happens after that. Next on the list is Mai, and while yes, she wasn't involved until the very end of the arc, I do place Mai above the Grandson and Ogami for a few reasons. The first is that she uses guns, and the Grandson and Ogami are for the most part regular humans. And even though Ogami is a curse user, she has literally no feats at all, and we see that when she is in danger, the Grandson is the one that always has to protect her to avoid her being seriously hurt or killed. And because Mai is very proficient with guns, with Kenjaku himself also saying that using conventional weapons, especially against sorcerers, is a really good idea, and we know that sorcerers, even those of grade 4, should be generally stronger than regular humans since they know how to properly wield and use their cursed energy, which is why I have Mai placed above them. Next is Momo, and as I said in my Goodwill event ranking video, you could have her or Mai interchangeable, but it really just depends on the arguments you want to use. If you believe Momo is above Mai, then Mai wouldn't be able to land shots on Momo since she's always airborne and can use her wind manipulation to terrorize Mai on the battlefield, and from what we know so far, she doesn't really have a counter against that. But if you want to say Mai is above Momo, then you could probably argue that if Mai was to somehow hit Momo with one of her bullets, especially her cursed energy bullet that she makes from her cursed technique, then one well-placed shot could put Momo down for the count. Next is Miwa, and I again believe that she can be interchangeable with Momo and Mai, but what really made me place her above those two was her showcase against Kenjaku. She was able to blitz behind him and use her new shadow style to attempt to cut Kenjaku, who ended up blocking her sword swing and breaking it. Even though he blocked the attack, I think it's very impressive nonetheless that she was able to get behind him, even though moments prior he reacted to Mai sniping him from across the entire city pretty much immediately. So because of that, I have Miwa above Momo and Mai. Next on the list is Haruta, and I think that his showcase during Shibuya is good enough to warrant him being above everyone else so far. So Haruta isn't super competent as a fighter, but it's mainly his curse technique that makes him somewhat decent in a fight against low tiers. His curse technique allows him to store miracles, and as a result, he's usually pretty lucky, being able to survive things that no regular person should be surviving. And this is so potent in fact that there is a case to be made that he might have survived his encounter with Mahoraga and Sukuna had he still had his miracles saved up. And as far as his feats go, he was able to battle against and outsmart Nobara, who later during the Shibuya incident would go on to have pretty impressive showings against the clone of Mahito. And not to mention, Nobara is also a grade 3 3 sorcerer who was able to deepen her understanding of curse energy with Black Flash and got somewhat stronger as well, and Haruto was able to beat her. But because of his showings against Nanami, this is as far as Haruto goes on the list. And at the top of F tier is the Grasshopper curse, and this thing is weird to talk about. After Yuji defeats the curse, Mahito says that the sorcerer must be really strong in order to do so. We know that the Grasshopper curse is strong since it's capable of human speech, but we only see it in a fight with Yuji, and there was an extreme gap not just in power between the two, but skill as well. But because of it being somewhere around a semi-grade 1 in terms of rank, I just don't see anyone below the curse being able to beat it in a straight up fight. Now we're at D tier, and at the bottom of this tier is Ino. Even though he's a grade 2 sorcerer and has his grade 1 promotion on hold, he doesn't have much feats during Shibuya. His only noteworthy feat is fighting against the grandson, and while he had the upper hand during the whole fight, he couldn't actually defeat the grandson, who was able to constantly react to and block many of Ino's attacks. And once Toji appeared, Ino got immediately speed blitzed and beat up really badly, so despite him being a grade 2, with his feats I don't really see him being higher on this list or beating anyone higher than him, so that's why I have him placed at the bottom of D tier. Next is Noritoshi Kamo, and I covered him in my Goodwill event ranking video, and since he has no feats during the Shibuya incident, I'll discuss what he's done from before. So Kamo was able to battle against and do pretty well against the holding back Megumi, with him being a very competent sorcerer and is strong in his own right. He was also able to do chip damage to Hanami with Piercing Blood, who is much more durable than Jogo, being able to take multiple Black Flashes from Yuji and attacks from Todo as well, who Hanami admits can both harm them. And that's way more impressive than what Ino has shown up until this point. Kamo also has a blood pack to refill on blood if he needs to, and this is why I have Kamo at the top of D tier. Next is C tier, and for the bottom of this tier I have Nobara. Now, like I said in Haruto's section, because Nobara was able to utilize Black Flash, her understanding and control of curse energy got much better, and she also could be argued to have gotten stronger just like Yuji had when he first performed Black Flash. And Nobara was able to perform really well against the Mahito clone, who despite not being able to use his idol transfiguration, was still a serious threat, and she was able to assist Yuji against the real Mahito before she was defeated. Next up is Maki, and this is a huge downgrade from her ranking during the Goodwill event, but I have her at C tier because of her performance against Dagon. Not only was she stated to be the weakest person present by Dagon himself during the fight, but she also had to get saved multiple times by Naobito, Nanami, and even Megumi, and wasn't considered the strongest by Edo Toji, who was fighting off of pure instinct and was going after the strongest person in the room, which he deemed to be a fatigued Megumi. But to her credit, she was able to react to most of Dagon's attacks, and she was also able to damage him a bit with Playful Cloud. I personally believe that Domain Dagon is above the Mahito clone since it isn't Mahito's full power and he can't actually use his idol transfiguration. So because of that and her feats, that's why I have her above Nobara. Next is Awasaka, and I mainly have him up here because of his curse technique and not so much his feats. His curse technique is called Inverse, and basically weak attacks become strong and strong attacks become weak. The only way he was shown to be beaten was to attack him with a weak and strong attack at the same time to stop his technique from activating. But another way to bypass his technique is to hit him with an attack that just outright bypasses his maximum limit. I don't see anyone below him on the list being able to significantly harm him to do that, because he was taking punches from an early Shibuya incident Yuji, who has a few statements of being on par with a grade 1 sorcerer in just pure strength alone. And I believe everyone above him can bypass his maximum limit and kill him. Next is the Smallpox deity, and as I said, this thing is able to bypass Awasaka's curse technique with its domain expansion. And what it does is it traps the opponent inside of a casket, and if the target cannot escape from it within 3 seconds, then it'll be infected by smallpox and die. Awasaka's curse technique has only been shown to work on physical trauma like punches, kicks, etc., and it doesn't seem to factor in things like poisons or sickness. So because of that, I think the Smallpox deity would be able to kill him, and since Awasaka also doesn't have counters to a domain, like a simple domain or his own domain expansion, that's why I have the Smallpox deity ranked above him. And at the top of C tier, I have Mechamaru, and this is really dependent on how you want to scale his feats. For example, if he fought the Smallpox deity, do you think he'd have his super big Megazoid Mechamaru robot, or do you think he'd have his standard one? This is important because if it's just his normal puppet, he'd only have his normal amount of curse energy reserve and output with his ultimate cannon. cannon. While if it's his super big robot, then he'd have 17 years worth of curse energy reserves, simple domain, and can have an output on the level of a special grade. So like I said, depending on which Mechamaru you use, then he can scale very differently. I do think his ultimate cannon is powerful enough to destroy the casket, and I also believe that Mechamaru is smart enough to figure out how the smallpox deity's domain works and defeat it. And I also think that Mechamaru would also be able to figure out Awasaka's curse technique and will be able to bypass his maximum limit with his ultimate cannon or even simple domain, which can nullify Awasaka's curse technique, and that's why I have Mechamaru at the top of C tier. Now we're at B tier, and for the bottom of this tier I have Nanami. Now he is a pretty strong sorcerer, with him being considered the representation of a grade 1 sorcerer, and also has a unique and pretty overpowered curse technique called Ratio. And what this does is divide the opponent into tenths and forcibly creates a weak point at 7-3. And if Nanami is able to strike this point, then he can score a critical hit and basically do massive amounts of damage to even stronger opponents. And he was able to do somewhat well against Dagon while in his domain and have 30% of the domain targeting him. And he was still able to stand and fight while having half of his body significantly burned. And he was able to beat up Haruto so bad that he used up the remaining stored miracles he had possession of. And that's why I have Nanami at the bottom of B tier. Now above him I have Megumi, and when I first made this ranking list, I actually had Megumi and Mechamaru both on the same tier, but once I rewatched the Shibuya incident in the anime and reread the manga, I knew I had to put Megumi a tier above. The main reason I have him in B tier is that he was able to outsmart and almost land a direct hit on Toji, when prior he wasn't able to land a single hit on him at all. And he was also able to develop an immediate strategy to try and take Toji down. For those that don't know, Toji was a huge force to be reckoned with during Shibuya. Megumi was even considered the strongest person in the room by Toji compared to a one-armed Naobito, injured and fatigued Nanami, and a fatigued Maki. Megumi also has his incomplete domain expansion, Chimera Shadow Garden, which gives him even more versatility in a fight. And he is just really competent and a very smart fighter as well. And all of these things culminate into why I have him a tier above Mechamaru and why he's above Nanami. Next on the list is Mei Mei, and to me personally, I think her and Megumi could probably be interchangeable, but that's a big probably. Mei Mei has said that she reached her physical peak, which should mean that physically she is one of the strongest grade 1 sorcerers, and she has her bird strike technique, which was so powerful that only Gojo has ever survived the technique. However, there is a glaring issue with this statement, and it's the fact that it's super vague and we don't know under what circumstances Gojo survived it. Did he have his infinity activated or did he not? Were they fighting? Questions like these we don't have the answer to, and it's too vague to make any sort of assumptions. But if you do think Gojo survived this without his limitless, and we know Bird Strike's AP is significantly increased because of the binding vow for the crow's life, then she would be above Megumi on the list. But if Gojo just had his limitless active and it didn't even touch Gojo, then Megumi would be above Mei Mei in my opinion. Let me know which one of these two you all think would win in a fight during this arc down below in the comments. Next on the list is Kusakabe, and there's two reasons why I have him here. The first is Mei Mei's statement she makes of him, where she says that she hasn't seen someone really strong without a curse technique since Kusakabe himself. And keep in mind, we learned from Gojo that 80% of a sorcerer's skill set is from talent alone. So the fact that Kusakabe is a grade 1 sorcerer and is seemingly at the peak of that without a curse technique with just his raw talent is pretty impressive to me. And the second reason I have him here is because of him intercepting and blocking a maximum Uzumaki from Kenjaku. Kusakabe was nowhere near Miwa or Kenjaku before the move was fired, and after he is in front of Miwa and just blocked most of the damage. We know that maximum Uzumaki combines all of the curse spirits Kenjaku has in his possession to make a really powerful concentrated blast of curse energy, and this blast likely included Mahito since he just absorbed him, and the scale of the attack is massive in size. And Kenjaku also gives praise to Kusakabe and his abilities, so that's also why I have him placed here. Next on the list I have Choso, and while he did have some nice showings, this is as far as I can place him on the list. Choso was able to have a drawn out close battle with Yuji, who was not only being compared to Kusakabe in combat efficiency, but was also being amped by fear, which, as we know, negative emotions can increase the sorcerer's curse energy. So Yuji was unquantifiably stronger than his base, and what makes Choso even more impressive is that he was stated by the narrator to be an inexperienced fighter, but was also able to outsmart and and defeat Yuji, who is pretty experienced in combat. He also fought against Kenjaku, but he wasn't really able to land any direct hits on him, so that fight really isn't important. The main thing that makes Cho so powerful is his blood manipulation. Unlike Kamo, he doesn't need a blood pack to refill his blood, and since he's a cursed womb and not a human or a full cursed spirit, he won't actually run out of blood and can pretty much spam his technique non-stop, and that's why I have Choso ranked here. Next on the list is Todo, and I have him above Choso because of him scaling to Yuji and Mahito. Todo, just like Yuji and Mahito, was able to perform a Black Flash, which makes the user stronger and deepens their understanding of curse energy, and all three of them were performing at 120% of their potential, which puts them over everyone mentioned on the list so far. And with Todo's curse technique Boogie Woogie, this allows him to swap places with people and objects that have a certain amount of curse energy, and gives Todo added versatility in combat, and use his IQ to come up with good strategies against the opponent. Next is Yuji, and I have him above Todo because of him being able to fight better against Mahito compared to Todo. Even when Mahito was in his ISB form, Yuji was still able to battle against him and defeat him with help from Todo. But Yuji was definitely putting more work into the fight, while Todo was just repeatedly using his curse technique. And there's also a narrator statement of Yuji being faster than Todo when Mahito activated his 0.2 second domain expansion, and Yuji was doing everything he was against Mahito, while his soul was at 10% HP and Todo's was at 100%, and even then he was still defeated. So with all of that said, that's why I have Yuji at the top of B tier. Now we're at A tier, and at the bottom of this tier I have Naobito Zenin. Naobito, from what we've seen, is pretty powerful as he has his projection sorcery, which allows him to move at 24 frames per second, and if he and the opponent don't abide by this rule or move in ways that defy physics, then they will become frozen. Naobito was also stated to be the second fastest Jujutsu sorcerer behind Gojo, and has a great battle sense with his technique, and what also makes him impressive is his feats against Dagon, specifically when he's in his domain, as Dagon allocates 70% of his domain sure hit to Naobito, and despite losing an arm, he's still able to react to and destroy Dagon's Shikigamis. And it's also important to note that Dagon was much stronger in his domain and could only be defeated by Toji. Dagon also notes that Naobito is possibly faster than Jogo, which means that they should both rival each other in speed, specifically when Naobito has both of his arms. That's why I have Naobito placed at the bottom of A tier. Next on this tier is Dagon, and as I said, he is pretty strong, being able to battle against and almost defeat Megumi, Nanami, Naobito, and Maki all at the same time before Toji showed up, with everyone before that just opting to leave his domain since they couldn't take him in a straight up fight. And it's also important to note that Dagon was stated by Nanami to have boundless HP, which means that Dagon is pretty durable and has techniques that can give everyone below him on this list massive trouble, like his domain expansion, which can summon infinite numbers of Shikigamis that can instantly spawn and attack targets in his domain, and he can even allocate how much of his domain can target his opponents. Couple this with him also tanking critical hits from Nanami's ratio strikes, Naobito's projection sorcery, and Maki's hits with Playful Cloud, and even Toji's to an extent. I don't really see anyone below him dealing with him in a one-on-one fight, especially in his domain, which is why I have Dagon placed here. Next is Hanami, and I have them placed here simply from scaling to Dagon, but scaling above him in terms of durability, since it's implied that Hanami is the most durable of all of the disaster curses, which means that Hanami would do just as, if not better than Dagon did, especially because of their durability. And although we didn't see Hanami's domain expansion in the anime yet, we have seen it in the Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade game, where they use the flower offering on their shoulder to blast curse energy at the opponent, and can make a flower field that drains the opponent of their will to fight, and possibly has their sure hit being the buds that drain the target of curse energy. So their domain expansion is really powerful, and they're even more durable than Dagon, who Nanami stated felt like had boundless HP, and has techniques that are just as deadly as Dagon's, which is why I have Hanami placed here. Next is Jogo, and I have him ranked above Hanami because of their elemental matchup, since fire beats earth, along with the fact that Jogo is also implied to be faster than Hanami, and is even said to be stronger than Dagon, with Nanami and Naobito stating that he's on another level compared to him. And in the Jujutsu Kaisen fanbook, it's said that if Kenjaku were to fight the disaster curses in a 1v1, he'd have the most trouble with Jogo and Mahito, which also proves that Jogo scales directly above Hanami and Dagon, which is why I have him placed here. Next on the list is Mahito, and I want to go in depth with him here, so let me explain. As I said, he and Jogo would give Kenjaku the most difficulty in a one-on-one fight based off the statement in the fan book. But as you all know, what really makes Mahito truly a strong and dangerous person is his idol transfiguration. With just one touch, he's able to completely transform you into whatever he wishes, pretty much making many fights a one-shot in his favor. As in order to counter or fight off this ability, you have to be aware of your soul and need to be able to protect your soul with cursed energy. However, if you are able to do those things or are substantially stronger than Mahito, then it will take multiple touches for him to transform you. And Mahito is also immune to all damage, which includes black flashes, unless you can directly damage his soul, or can nullify his curse technique like with a domain expansion or a simple domain. But speaking of domains, that is also something that's even more dangerous, since Mahito can activate his domain, which he can also do in 0.2 seconds, then the opponent will instantly get hit by Mahito's hand and will get transfigured immediately. But that isn't all though, as Mahito can also use his instant spirit body of distorted killing, which not only makes him 200% tougher than he is normally, but he can also still use his idol transfiguration. The only downside to this form, however, is that his metamorphosis is halted, and Hanami also says that Mahito has the highest potential compared to the rest of the disaster curses and would keep growing stronger, which he ended up doing. So all of this is why I have him at this placement. Next is Urame, and this might be confusing, so let me explain. It's pretty obvious that Urame is a really competent fighter, being a servant for Sukuna, but what's most impressive about them is their curse energy output and efficiency. As soon as we see Urame pull up on everyone, they're immediately able to react to and dodge piercing blood from Choso. Keep in mind, we saw Yuji being able to barely dodge it during his fight with Choso, and said that he had a 50-50 chance of actually avoiding it, and if he was careless, then he would instantly die. This would already place Urame above everyone in the B tier, and they even exceed everyone within A tier, since they were able to use Icefall to completely freeze everyone on the battlefield, including Yuji, who's able to perceive and attack the soul directly, and was almost about to straight up kill him had Yuki not intervened. But if you don't like this line of scaling, you could also say that Urame is relative to Kenjaku to some degree, since they were both fodderizing everyone there with pretty much no difficulty, and Kenjaku blatantly scales above Yuji since he was holding back severely and still damaging him, while Yuji, although very fatigued, was going all out to try and get the prison realm. And he also scales above Mahito since he was able to stop his sneak attack and absorb him, and was said in the fanbook to be able to beat Mahito in a 1v1, although with much difficulty. And Yuji just got done beating a 120% potential and ISB Mahito, who Urame was also severely holding back on, with Yuji saying that the only reason Urame didn't completely freeze him was because of Sukuna. So that's why I have them at the top of A tier. Now we're at S tier, and this is where I have the strongest people during this arc placed. Starting with the bottom of this tier, I have Toji. Now, Toji during this arc was an absolute beast of nature. He casually blitzed and beat up Ino with no difficulty. He then proceeded to beat up Dagon while he was in his own domain, with you being in your own domain increasing your stats. Even though Dagon's sure hit was temporarily nullified, Toji was still able to destroy his Shikigamis with ease, and was able to significantly harm Dagon, who Nanami said had boundless HP. He then fought Megumi, who he considered to be the strongest in the room, and was beating up Megumi so bad that not only could he not perceive his movements with his eyes, but he had to rely on pure instinct to combat him, but also had to goad him into falling for a sneak attack, and was still able to dodge out of the way, with the only person that was able to beat Toji being himself. But this isn't even talking about how broken his heavenly restriction is. With it, he's able to be completely immune to domain expansion since they treat him as a building or inanimate object, so everyone that's below him with a domain expansion wouldn't even be able to actually use it since he wouldn't even be considered a target. And Toji is also able to perceive and interact with the soul, as we see during Shibuya, since the grandson's soul lost to Toji's body, which means that if he were to fight Mahito, then he would be able to damage him and be resistant to idol transfiguration, and is also immune to his domain expansion. So that's why I have Toji at the bottom of S tier. Next on the list is Mahoraga, and this Shikigami is extremely overpowered. It has the ability to adapt to any and all phenomena Sukuna and is compared to being like a late throw in rock, paper, scissors. Mahoraga can adapt to things pretty quickly, and once it has adapted to something, there must be a new and effective way to take down the Shikigami before it can adapt again. I have Mahoraga over Toji since he lacks the AP and versatility to take down Mahoraga, since that is what will be needed to take it down. Mahoraga was also able to tank multiple dismantle slashes and cleave slashes, with cleave being able to literally match itself to the energy output and durability of the target, and Mahoraga was surviving and adapting to attacks that were adapting to the Shikigami with no trouble at all, only able to be defeated by a fire arrow from 15 Finger Sukuna. While yes, Toji is extremely fast and very strong, he doesn't have the necessary versatility to combat and defeat Mahoraga in battle. At best, he'd be able to probably do chip damage before it adapts, but since he doesn't have any other ways of fighting the Shikigami, then there's a very high chance that it can adapt to piercing or stab attacks, or even physical attacks in general, since that's all of what Toji can do. And if you use the anime, then you could argue even more in Mahoraga's favor, since the Shikigami was going blow for blow with 15 Finger Sukuna, who is another beast I'll talk about shortly. And that's why I have Mahoraga above Toji. Now we've made it to the top 3 strongest characters during the Shibuya incident, and I feel that some of y'all might get angry at me, but like I always say, please let me explain. At number 3, the 3rd strongest character during this arc, I have Kenjaku. Now he actually has not only the AP to one-shot Mahoraga, but he also has the versatility as well. He has his cursed spirit manipulation, which as the name suggests, he can manipulate many different cursed spirits. All have many different abilities that can definitely give Kenjaku the edge over Mahoraga. And he also has his maximum Uzumaki, which is his most destructive and powerful move he has in his arsenal, where he's able to combine all of his cursed spirits into a singular condensed concentrated beam of cursed energy, and it is so powerful that it can pretty much destroy almost anything within its path, only being blocked by Kusakabe's new shadow style. With these things together, I can definitely see Kenjaku being way stronger than Mahoraga, and can defeat it in combination with his very high battle IQ, which is why I have Kenjaku at the number 3 spot. Next at number 2, I have 15 Finger Sukuna, and there's a lot to say about him, so let me begin. The first thing I'd like to discuss about him is his aura, and in my opinion, this is one of the things that do play quite a huge part in his placement. When 15 Finger Sukuna emerged, he was already being compared to Gojo off of his aura alone, which is noted as being much more vile and evil than Gojo's. And he had people not even thinking about breathing while in his presence, and forced people to kneel and bow down towards him without thought, showing that not only is his presence feared by many individuals, but his power as well, since feeding him fingers was a backup plan should sealing Gojo not work, which should also confirm that Sukuna would have been a viable option against Gojo, although because he was at 15 fingers, which would be 75% of his full power, then Sukuna would still lose against Gojo. And just in case anyone believes that Toji during this arc is above 15 Finger Sukuna, he is a literal antithesis to Toji when it comes to his moveset. He has his cleave slashes, which can adjust itself to the target's energy levels and durability. Since Toji doesn't have cursed energy, then cleave would just adjust itself to Toji's durability and one-shot him. And there's also Sukuna's domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine, which doesn't have a barrier, so it wouldn't trap Toji within it, making one of the ways he can usually ignore a domain not possible. But he has his dismantle and cleave slashes, which not only do what I said before, but can also target inanimate objects or things with no cursed energy, which applies to Toji, and are sure hit attacks, which also means that they will spawn on his coordinates and more than likely one-shot him, which is why I have 15 Finger Sukuna at the number 2 spot. And finally at number 1, to no one's surprise, is Satoru Gojo. He's just said to be the strongest sorcerer and character as of currently within the series, and has hacks and abilities that make him pretty much untouchable in a regular one-on-one fight. And until we get new information regarding Gojo and his status, he is, as of right now, still the strongest character in JJK. Thank you all for watching the video. This took quite a while to make, so I hope that you all can leave a like, subscribe, and comment, and help support both me and the channel. If you'd like to watch another JJK video, then you can check out my Goodwill event ranking video, or if you'd like to check out another video of mine, then you could watch my Broly vs Beast Gohan video if you're a Dragon Ball fan and would like to see my thoughts on that. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.